I am Emily Udy. I'm Preservation Manager for Historic Salem. Historic Salem is, as I'm sure you know, the preservation advocacy group here in Salem. We're nearing our 75th year of incorporation. And we have a two-part mission that is both to ensure the historic resources of Salem are preserved for future generations, and also to ensure that new development complements the historic nature of the community. Before I get into my talk, I want to thank Jessica. She is an incredible force with the Historic Commission, and utilizes the 6-month demolition delay that we have in its full power. And I think there are dozens of buildings throughout Salem that we have her to thank for it, and I think Fell Street is an incredible example. So historic preservation is many things. At the heart of preservation is the desire to maintain the places that we define our community, so that we can understand our place in the timeline of society. When we are engaged in preservation, we are essentially deciding what we want to survive into the next century, and that is a pretty big responsibility. Stephanie Meeks, president of the National Trust for Historic Preservation, says that we need to make sure that we honor and reflect the full contours of our past, including the complex and difficult chapters. Preservation is about managing change and should have an important role in how a city is run. This will allow there to be a smooth continuum between past and future. Fully utilized, preservation will unleash the enormous potential of historic buildings to address the critical problems that we face, including issues of housing, emerging businesses, quality of life, and sustainability. The job of preservation advocates is not to prevent change, believe it or not, but to leverage the tools, techniques, and habits that exist or are learned from historic buildings and neighborhoods to help our community move forward in a positive direction. So in this looking forward, it is imperative that we address how preservation supports sustainability and resiliency. England is a leader in dealing with historic cities, and they use the word conservation to describe both the retention of natural and built resources. Preservation and sustainability are intrinsically tied together. I had wanted to lead with how preservation plays an important role in lowering waste and energy usage, but it is really key to point out that our historic resources are grossly at risk due to environmental factors. The preservation movement is indebted to the sustainability movement for their efforts to preserve our natural environment. Salem was settled on the shores, and our history is tied to the water. As a result, many of our historic resources will face natural demolition by flood level change and as daily tides move higher and higher. Historic houses and buildings built before air conditioning evolved, if you will, to meet the climate needs of the area. In New England, this means that historic buildings keep cool by taking advantage of prevailing winds. Rooms in historic houses are small. They have doors that can divide the house, making the rooms easier to heat. Stairways from basement to attic allow heat to vent upwards in the summer. Moderate-sized, double-hung windows, often with interior shutters, keep heat or cold out or in as appropriate. Brick or thick plaster walls keep buildings comfortable for longer when the temperatures change. These character-giving features that we associate with historic buildings are not just a style preference, but passive ways to keep a home comfortable without additional energy use. But I still have air conditioning units in my house. Beyond historic construction methods, preservation has long been contributing to environmental conservation, whether it was recognized or not. Donovan Ripkema, a leading preservation economist, pointed out in a lecture that he delivered in Salem in 2015 that saving a 2,200 square foot house from demolition is equivalent to cutting the lifetime plastic bag use of 440 people. He also highlighted a study that showed that to rehab a historic house used 47 tons of material energy. That includes energy to create and ship the materials. So 47 tons for a rehabbed house. To build a new home on a clear site used 182 tons, which is 3 times more than rehabbing the historic house. To demo the old house, haul it to a landfill and rebuild with LEED Gold architecture standards, so very high sustainability standards, uses 351 tons, or 7 times more energy than it would take to rehab a house of the same size. So once again, Stephanie Weeks says, it simply does not make sense to recycle cans and newspapers to save energy and not recycle buildings. So Salem does have some, what we would call tear downs. They are not as rampant as other communities, and I feel like we're basically sliding under the wire, particularly as Jessica mentioned in the Willows. And so I think it's important that we understand the environmental impact that demolishing a house has. So demos do happen in Salem, and we are always advocating for their retention. But the other thing that we face as a growing city is construction on empty lots. Often a building was there but was demolished decades ago. And these sit nestled in our historic buildings and neighborhoods. In new construction, we can learn a lot about sustainability from traditional neighborhood development. At a neighborhood scale, our beautiful tree-lined streets are a major factor in keeping buildings cool. In addition, our neighborhoods developed as walkable or streetcar neighborhoods. Walkability is all the rage for individual health and well-being, but it also contributes greatly to less car trips, higher use of public transportation, less use of fossil fuels, better air quality, and lower consumption of automobiles in general. Salem's traditional city development allows my household of 2 professionals and 3 kids to only use 1 car, and the same applies to many of my Salem peers. This leads to lower parking needs, although I know they are significant, fewer fields of asphalt, and smaller heat islands. If we could ensure that large-scale construction in our city used a traditional style of city planning, we would see fewer developments that are cut off from neighborhoods and render residents dependent on their cars. I feel very strongly that traditional neighborhood development will allow us to extend the character and quality of life that we enjoy in our historic neighborhoods to the new residents of Salem. This will increase the quality of our built environment and decrease our impact on the natural environment. I'll close with one final point about new construction. Oh, how we love to say that they don't build things like they used to. And while material and labor supplies may be different than they were in the past, it is hard not to notice that some new buildings in Salem are built to last, and others are built to last for just a few decades. So I only put the built to last pictures up here. I didn't want to call out any names. I had my opinion if you want to talk afterwards. Historic Salem's intention when commenting on new construction is to ask for and expect that what is being built now will be worth preserving in 100 years. All of our efforts to cut plastic bag usage now will be for naught if we end up tearing down buildings that have outlived their usefulness before the builders have even retired. It is institutions like the city government and community advocacy organizations that must expect the best from our developers. From them, we get new residents, new businesses, and tax dollars. And to them, we lend our streets, our services, and the marketability of our vibrant city. Preservation should be about having local regulations that allow buildings to have vibrant, active uses and be relevant in the needs of the people and the cities that surround them. This intention of having logical regulations is what we ask the city to hold us. We ask the city to hold us to that standard. In exchange, we will continue to advocate that our urban landscape reflect more than just profit margins or the whims of developers and real estate speculators. We need new development to address the real needs and concerns of our valuable historic neighborhoods. Thank you.